pleasure and an honor. I think Ratene and Madhu reached out to me a couple of months ago and asked whether I'd be, interested in doing this, and I said, of course. I mean, I hope this is as entertaining for you as it has been exciting for me to put together. As he said, a lot of you I've known growing up. All of you have seen me sort of growing up from being a small child. I also have classmates here who I'm like sharing the entire room with, so it makes me really, really happy to be here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about like my sustainability story. So it's not highly technical, but it sort of gives you an idea as to how I sort of fit this mold of sustainability through my years of just being and living and working and doing whatever it is that I got the opportunity and I was blessed enough to do. So I'll get started. So my story, part 1, starts with my mom. All of you know. So I grew up with this force in my home, and when she first started, she had her studio at home. It was in our backyard, and I kind of used to spend all my time sitting under her table, learning about things at a very young age. Like I didn't have toys, I had material samples. So it was a very different kind of childhood growing up. And as he said, during the introduction they talked about having the understanding cost effectiveness, and I think Amma's projects were all these random experiments that would happen in our backyard of how many bricks do we need to stack at minimum to make this arch work. And I was like exposed to all of this from an age which was, I guess, a little unfair. I must have been 8 or 9 years old and I was carrying bricks. I'm happy we didn't get like called over for child labor or something like that. But anyway, these were the early experiments, and like I think some of her earlier projects, which were for Hutco, would always be so far away from the city. So she'll say, come with me. We go to Guru Anjali. I used to think it's so fantastic. I get to go with my mother to Guru Anjali. So we make a whole day trip out of it, and this was all learning for me to just understand what it meant to build with less and still deliver products that can work for people, work for human beings, as well as the larger environment, and be very, very sort of I guess, how do you say, in sync with our environment. So yeah, this is home, obviously, Chennai, and from Chennai, which looks like this, to this, to this, and this was also my kind of background. So I grew up knowing that I loved the beach, I respected ecology, I also respected the crowds. I used to love going shopping at Paris Corner with Appa to go buy patas. So what it meant to have minimum amounts of space, but maximum amount of like retail and all these little things that you don't really think shape your sensibilities actually do. And when you're actually sitting and designing new cities and new towns, all these things start mattering. And so your understanding of space and scale. And I was also very blessed and fortunate. Both my parents pushed me into the arts when I was very young. I did my first few stage shows when I was just about 11 or 12 years old. And learning Bharatanatyam and having an appreciation for culture and for art has really shaped the way in which I sort of see different things, the kind of the details and the nuances that go into making us truly unique and Indian. So I think that all this training from a very young age has sort of helped hone me into being who I am today. So part 2 of my design story. So after Chennai, I moved to New York. So from here, direct, I remember I barely submitted my thesis. Ilam was also there. We were all just finishing up and we just finished our thesis. I submitted and the next day I was on a flight out. So from Chennai, straight, direct transplant to New York. And it was a bit of a shock because it was a huge, big city. I had never lived away from home, and I think from learning to cook, to shop, to just living by yourself, everything had to be relearned at that stage. And most people, when you say New York City, think of images like this, like really lovely, tall buildings, skyscrapers, fantastic lights at Times Square. And this was like my college neighborhood. It's a little bit more real because I think you can see the scale of the buildings are only 3 or 4 floors. Go next. And then I went to New York and I still found myself around garbage. So, there was all these fantastic parts of the city, but somehow I was gravitating towards all the places with the worst issues, the hardest neighborhoods, the places which had, problems that were so similar to India, density, garbage. Go to the next slide here. So, like things like this, which I thought was so fascinating, like, these were like typical African American neighborhoods where they throw up, go back 1 second. The detail for that was actually that they'll hang their shoes on the light, and that's basically like a sign that this was one particular gang's area. So I was learning all this like stuff about like how New York City works. And then there were all these like neighborhoods which were in Manhattan, next, but were boarded up, like really expensive real estate with nobody living there. So I started figuring out that I really enjoyed working with like larger people issues, what it meant to be in a social community, as well as keep it in many ways sustainable, because a neighborhood like this is worth a lot of money, but then no one wanted to live here for other reasons. So what are the other reasons that make it livable or not livable started becoming very exciting for me to try and understand. And then part 3 was, of course, in 2008, the homecoming of, and I like to call myself the returned millennial, right? So, I've come back, I've gained all of this knowledge, been away in the US for almost a decade, worked and lived over there, understood what the real issues are in terms of how people live and work. Go to the next slide. And this is the first thing in front of our office. Appa was very insistent that we have this. This is Lord Vishwakarma. He actually went through great pains to get this statue made. And he'd always talk to me with like so much passion about like what it meant to be, the celestial architect. Look in his hand, he has this ayudam, and all that. He'll keep on telling me about all of this stuff. Like, so coming back, I was still back entrenched in this kind of world. So next. And of course, our buildings and our urban issues somehow to me still were not very exciting. Like all our buildings looked like this, like from first semester climatology class with the sunshades, looked like they were built by engineers, not very inspiring. This is the old part of Chennai. And this of course was the new part of Chennai, also not very inspiring. Buildings that looked like they were all covered in like glass and aluminium composite panels. So I started really wondering, what is the real role of you as an Indian designer today, in today's context? So that kind of started becoming my whole, obsession to try and figure this out. And around the world, if you look at it, all my classmates or like friends in the United States would automatically say a couple of things about India. One was Bollywood, right? These were our identities. Like around the world, globally, people are like, oh, I love Shah Rukh Khan. So that's one of the few things that they say. The next thing that they talk a lot about is yoga, right? So like, being spiritual, having a sort of connection with yoga. A lot of them have been to Rishikesh, to Varanasi, to a lot of places that I think even we as children never had the opportunity to go and travel and see or even understand. And then of course they associate us with this. So the modern day, they associate us with a lot of the work that happens in terms of the IT sector. So as a young Indian designer, for me it started becoming about figuring out the value of Indianness, what it meant to have these cultural values that I grew up with, the value of coming back with these like sensibilities that were so westernized, because my education felt very, very American at that point. And I wanted to change the approach of traditional design and find a way to work with tradition while being modern and still relevant in today's context. Of course, challenge the architectural landscape and work with sustainability in a manner in which it was a little bit more all-encompassing. I came back, and when I came back, I was one of the first, I think, 3 people that had that sustainability label, that certificate that allowed you to practice sustainability in the country. Now there are thousands of them. But then the point is that when I first came back, that was like, that was the differentiator. You've had a sustainable education. So what did that mean versus the traditional on-the-ground education that my mom had in sustainability through practice? I'm going to skip through this. I think this is just the role of designers and how it's evolved. And the bottom line is that today it's a highly integrated practice. We're working with so many disciplines that are all trying to come together. It's highly engineered. It's got a lot of tech working with us back end. And design is not just like one person sitting behind a drafting table and like churning out everything that is required for like a particular project. So yeah. So then coming back to our main philosophies, which are again highly influenced by how I grew up with my parents, cultural preservation, having an identity, working with Indo-centric design principles, working with sustainability as a whole, and also working on like then taking all of this and then inverting that perspective along with a sort of modern twist. At this point, I also want to say, at some point I figured that I was a decent enough writer. I think a lot of my learning and relearning on sustainability practices came from starting to write a column. 4 years ago, I have around 200 articles which talk about sustainable living and how to practice sustainability in your daily life. So I think that my sort of every week I research it. It's a huge task. Of course, I'm working and doing everything, but every week I research a new topic and I write for the Indian Express. So yeah. So I'll just talk a little bit. I have 3 little stories that I wanted to talk about. So these are actual projects or parts of a project. Yeah. So this is the first design story, which talks about cultural preservation. All of us recognize this. I think I had at least 24 Tanjavur paintings as part of my wedding gifts. So, and all of them have a very similar design language. In the sense, they're all rectangular, they're all framed, they're all put behind glass, they're all themes of God. So this is Tanjavur painting as we know it. A few people that wanted to change this started putting Tanjavur paintings on things like small keychains and trays and things like that so that it becomes a little bit more modern. So I wanted to try and figure out how to push the envelope. So yeah, so these are the people that do Tanjavur art. This is the scale at which Tanjavur art is today. Small frames, maybe this big, 6 inches by 8 inches. Maximum if you go, you'll get about 1 foot, And these guys used to do projects and works of art which were, stories tall. Like the kings would get their paintings done, which would be like, Rendumadi height and, things that are so grand. But today they were working on small little things and struggling to do that same kind of work. So my sort of interest became, how do we take this and sort of put it into a place which is contemporary and modern and give these people an opportunity to continue being proud of what they're doing. So yeah. So yeah, this is the Tanjavur art process. Obviously very complicated. It involves plaster Paris, gold, beautiful gemstones, all of that. Next. So this was my idea. So we had a wall which was about 7 meters tall. 7 meters is almost 20 plus feet, so almost 2 stories tall. And I wanted to do a Tanjavur based art installation. So there was a lot of research that went into it. There were a couple of things that I wanted to do that were going to break it away from being typical Tanjavur art. One is, I wanted the edges of the artwork to be free flowing, not in a rectangle, and no glass. So then we could kind of, people could come up close to it and actually, feel what that work of art was like. So we did some research, found a resin that would then seal in the material, and this is the final product. So you can see here that it's a 2-story, and so all those little elements over there are all Tanjavur art, and each one is so massive. But at the end of the day, I think what was really, really fulfilling was when the artists came and said to me, Amma, so thank you, Ma, for this opportunity. So, to be able to do things like that engage our own craftsmen and, to be giving them an opportunity in our architecture, in a very, otherwise, as you can see, fairly contemporary building, you can see there's exposed concrete and exposed, all these finishes which look very cutting edge and modern. But to give them a showcase to be able to do something like that was really a very project that was close to my heart. Yeah. Close-ups of it. Yeah. Good. Okay. Moving on to Indo-centric design, this is another really cool project that we recently worked on with a lot of technology. So obviously all of us, some of us at least, may recognize this. This is a section of the Tanjavur Birhadeshwara temple, and it was built by King Rajaraja Chola in 1010 AD. And the principles of design with which this was designed. Oh, sorry, next slide. Was something called Agama Shastra. I mean, all of us have heard of Vastu Shastra, right? I mean, it's become so mainstay, we can't practice architecture with or without it. We want to like basically uh, forget about its existence, but we can't ignore it. But Agama Shastra is what used to be used as the Shastra to define our principles of temple building. So it was like the way in which a temple would be built. And it was tanning to the human form, which basically meant the chakras of the body. Again, so ties back to yoga, our yogic principles, unlocking the chakras. So various parts of the building needed to be placed in those particular locations to be able to say that a building adhered or a temple building adhered to Agama Shastra. So this is a modern temple that we worked on recently. So what we did was we took all these elements and made that the principle with which we placed all our various elements of the entire temple complex. So as per Agama Shastra, the proportions for this particular design were in line. So we started with the basics being absolutely right. Next. Next. Yeah, so that was it. So the Gopuram was at the foot of the person. I think the main hall, which is the end part, is at where the head of the person would lie, and all of this is that exact same proportion that you would have followed from the Agama Shastra book. In other words, it's the same way a person from 1010 AD would have drawn a plan, if they did draw a plan, for the Tanjavur Temple. Just a different proportion, but the same ideas of how things are placed from certain distances from each other. But it was a modern temple, and this is today. So apart from Vastu, our client was very into numerology. So the brief that he gave me was it has to adhere to the number 11. That's my lucky number according to numerology. So it had to be Agama Shastra compliant. That was our own rule and our own self-imposed constraint. But he also was very particular about the number 11. And so we started breaking up the number 11, what it meant, how it was a master number, it was the smallest prime number. And then we got into the whole idea of what does it mean geometrically as well as mathematically to crack the number 11. So it became almost a project in understanding maths, arithmetics and geometry, which is a very interesting intersect for us, as well as then trying to, play to the sentiments of the client and his love for the number 11. So next. So we found out that firstly, that 11-sided polygon is called a hendecagon. So this was new for me. I knew up to pentagon, octagon. Then now hendecagon came into the picture, and we were looking at it. 11 sides. It has 11 vertices. It has an internal angle of 147.27 degrees. It has one symmetry of axis, and we found it was really quite an uninspiring shape. Nothing exciting about a hendecagon. 11-sided, fairly sappy looking, piece of geometry, and we were really racking our heads, how to make this very exciting. So then we started working with, the computer and the simulations that were possible from it. So while still toying with it on paper, we found out that the hendecagon is actually a really very sad piece of geometry. You can't even construct it with a compass. Like, all of us know how to draw things we would have taught. We were all taught at some point how to draw with a compass and a ruler and construct all the other polygons. Hendecagon you cannot draw. So it's obviously it's a complicated piece of geometry. You could, however, be constructed using origami. So that became interesting for us. So we said, okay, so there's something interesting to do now, next. But even with an origami, you can't use it with a single fold piece of origami. So you can't just make one fold and then create it. You have to use what they call as a double fold kind of method. Next slide. So you need to do 2 simultaneous folds in origami to be able to construct a hendecagon. So I can't construct it with a compass. I can't construct it with a ruler. I can only use 2-form double-sided origami to be able to do this. So this started adding levels of complexity into the form, which is actually very interesting for us. So we took that idea that it needed to be 11-sided, found a 2-fold module that we really liked, made that our inspiration for the entire volume. And taking that 2-fold origami, rotating it 360 degrees, making sure it adhered to 11 not only in plan with 11 sides, but also went 111 by 55.5, which is also again modules of 11, and also adhering to the golden ratio. and then came up with 11-sided form, which was a pure form based on sacred geometry. So this is the purest form that we could evolve. So it became a very interesting mathematical / computer generating exercise for us. And then, of course, the other challenges of how do you place emphasis, and the deity had to be sitting within this particular space. So how we change that emphasis to try and make sure that the deity is not sitting all the way at the back, but somewhere in the middle, but by still maintaining 11 equal sides. Next. So yeah, so we came up with this to be able to have 11 equal sides, having a central feature point while maintaining symmetry. And then, of course, running the entire thing through what we would call our sustainability simulations to make sure that we had the right amount of glass, the right directions, to make sure that we were not going to create a form that would then become too hot for us to be able to have a mass of almost 800 people within. Nice. So yeah, all our thermal analysis that kind of come up from that. So then working it really through a computerized process. And then, of course, the structure then has to come in. Everything else that kind of comes in, and then the final design. So so this was my second experiment with design and being sustainable. Next.
What is this temple?
It's a temple.
Where?
It's in a part of Madras which is yet to come up, called Koppu.
You can see 800 people. What date?
Yeah, Sai Baba.
800 people.
800, yeah. Last project that I wanted to talk about next. Design story number 3 happens to be my house, so therefore very close to my heart. My mom and dad built this place for us. That's actually him. You can see my dad in that picture. But so they built this house in 2003. That was the year I got married. It was built very quickly, just before the wedding, so that we could have a bunch of fun occasions over there. And Amma built it with her design sensibilities of being very sustainable. I think the way the bricks were laid was very unique, and all of that. And my husband and I decided that we wanted to move to Akkare because staying in Gandhinagar was not exciting enough for us. So at some point we decided to remodel the house. So that's this project next. So we started by dismantling it. You saw the first picture. So it had had all these tiles. It had all these wood rafters. And this was the brick technique that Amma had used for the original house, which is what they call a rat trap bond technique, which essentially cuts down your number of bricks by 30%. So it has an air cavity. So it helps us in 2 ways. One is it cuts down how much brick we use, and 2 is it gives you that air cavity, so it helps with the thermal comfort inside the space. So you obviously get a better insulation for the space. So this is the idea of the house coming up. Everything was very carefully built. We dismantled everything from the old house to be able to make sure that it was integrated into the new home. So yeah, so it's all of us working on site. The concept was simple. I think this part of the house was the existing 900 square feet that was built around the time of my marriage. But we wanted to kind of grow and expand the house to include 2 other bedrooms. So the idea was to have a central courtyard, but also have a little swimming pool, like a swimming totti, but my dogs actually think it's their water bowl. So we're always fighting for who the swimming pool actually belongs to. But yeah, and we have a massive, concrete wall in front of it. Obviously, I wanted to bring in elements that were very modern, so I felt like I was still connected to New York, So we had all of that. And then, go to the next slide now. And this is the final product. So what we have here is a huge amount of reuse. We reused all the tile that was around the corner on the old building. We reused all the granite columns. We built that concrete wall and then took that wood and then built the doors. So everything was very reused. Talk about reusing all the material that used to be there. Just a close up of the detailing, so you can see how the brick kind of changes its course a little bit and then gives us that thermal insulation. Those tiles that were part of the old house that now became part of the entrance. Some of the other shots of the house where you can see the water bowl / swimming pool in the middle. the living spaces. So it really was about being able to have a home that was very connected to the outside, to be able to see all the garden as well as the pool. So this living room is actually, I mean, it's great as per design. It's not so great. During the 2016 floods, I think we had a bit of a problem. The living room was on NDTV and it was underwater. but yeah, so, and we used a lot of like our local materials. So this is like that Akambari tile. And I was so surprised that it was so inexpensive and yet so beautiful. And still so many of us like think 3 times before we use it. Next. A lot of play of light over here. Again, it is an east-facing home, so the idea that light can come in and then do all these magical things at different times of day. A lot of glass, as you can see. We have floating glass floors, contemporary concrete walls. Yeah, and then the house in the courtyard. And this is really who lives there. Okay, so I have about 6 of them right now. They live in the house. They very nicely allow me to stay there at night and allow me to swim in their water bowl once in a while. But this is also something that's really close to my heart. I care for and rehabilitate stray dogs. So this is their sanctuary. This boy I found with a shattered pelvis kind of came alive in this house and makes it what it is today. So that's it. That's my design story. So thank you.